My aim today is to give you the tools to be able to evaluate your robotic systems from the human point of view. This is human-centered experimentation. I mean, we want to know how people feel when they are interacting with a robot. You saw during this summer school that robots are becoming essential in our daily life. And we can find them in many, many situations, like industry, homes, hospitals. You saw several talks about assistive robotics as well. So it's very important to evaluate if the perception of humans about the robotic system is accepted or not. And this is what you will learn today with me, or at least I expect from you to learn these topics. But before I start, okay. Just a brief introduction about my research. I'm a researcher here at EDI, and I'm focused on social robot navigation. That is how robots has to move when they are close to people. The idea here is that we understand how people move, and we apply all the theories that we create into robotics. And after that, what we obtain are robots that are capable of, in some sense, imitate how people move. And not only that, they are also capable of follow the social conventions that we have, like respecting the personal space. Okay, and of course, I'm developing all that systems, but on the other point of view, I evaluate all that systems, okay? And that's what I will teach to you today. After that, we go one step further, and we move not only on ground robots, but also on flying robots. So we create a new model that allows aerial robots to navigate close to people. So we are not treating people as obstacles. We are also treating people as social beings. Okay, this is the crucial point of our research, treating people as a different way. And of course, there is another step regarding navigation, which is collaboration between robots and humans. And here's a particular work that we present this year, where a robot and the person are collaborating in a specific task. That task was to look for an object in an unknown environment. Here we have the robot and the people, and the communication between the robot and the person was one of my students created an APP mobile phone, and we create this channel of communication, because you will see today that the interaction between the robot and the person could be as many as you can imagine. We can use mobile phones, we can use uterines, we can use visual signal signs, okay, wherever you want. It could be useful to communicate with them. But I will go ahead with the presentation of today, just to give you a brief idea of what I'm working with. So the content of today is as follows. I want to start introducing a little bit about the human-robot interaction field. Then we will talk about the modalities and resources for social human-robot interaction. And finally, which is the main important thing and the main block of this talk today, is the evaluation methods and methodologies for human-robot interaction research. So what is human-robot interaction? Human-robot interaction is a field inside robotics that systematically studies the interaction between humans and robots. That is, how people behave when they are walking with robots, walking or interacting or sharing the same space, and how robots behave, how people behave, and which is the perception of people when they are behaving or sharing that space with robots. Okay, here I'm showing you some really different examples, because we can apply this interaction in the industry, we can apply it in the cities, and also with the companion robots that interact with children. So everything that you have a robot and a person sharing some space, okay, we are talking about interaction. We can classify, there are different levels of interaction between humans and robots. The first one is the human-robot coexist. Okay, here the robot and the human have separated working areas and do not interfere frequently. Human can occasionally enter working zone of the robot, but they are not working together. Okay? They are just sharing a space. Then we have the human-robot cooperation. Here the robot and the human have shared working areas. The human enters working zone of the robot frequently, and both of them work on separate areas. They can have a common goal. Okay, in the example that I showed you in the previous slides, we have a robot and the human looking for an object. So they have a common goal, but that's why they are cooperating, but they are not in contact. Okay, that's why they are just cooperating and not collaborating. Where collaborating is the following step. Okay, here it's the same than the previous one, the cooperation, but they are in contact. Okay, they are touching each other, so the interaction is closer. Usually, this interaction is called physical human-robot interaction. Then we have some examples here. I prepared some examples here for you to see different types of interaction. The first one is an object, a robot that helps that helps blind people to move. And here the interaction is it's done through a stick. Okay, the contact is a stick. There's no verbal utterance. There's nothing else, just a stick. And with this kind of interaction, people can move in unknown spaces. Then we'll have okay, here we can say that this is a cooperative, okay, the cooperative interaction. Then we have the exoskelettic. These kind of robots are interacting in some sense with people. They are touching them, and the robot needs to understand what is happening. Okay, a robot needs to understand if the person is moving, it's accelerating, it's braking. Okay, this is and the interaction is done through this contact. Okay, this is collaborative interaction. And finally, the last one, the companion robots. There are many nowadays of this kind of robots. You can find them to help children with autism. You can find them also with elderly people. And basically, it's to give some kind of companion and helping people in this in the daily task. And there's a specific kind of robot which are called humanoid robots. Are those robots that has a human appearance, that have legs, arms, a head imitating our appearance, and they are the most frequently used in human-robot interaction, because we saw that the appearance of the robot, if you want to have an interaction with people, it's important. Okay, and that's why Murray presented in 1970 this graph that relates the human likeness of a robot with the acceptance of that robot. And it has been demonstrated that as the robot is more human-like, the acceptability of that robot increases. If acceptability of the robot increases, means that interaction between the robot and the human, it's gonna be better. Okay, that's why the appearance of the robot is important. But be careful, because here appears what it's called the uncanny valley. And if you were in this area, the interaction may fail. If interaction fails, if you have a super robot that is capable of doing a specific task with a good performance, with metrics, really good metrics, but it's not accepted, your goal may fail. Okay, that's why here the acceptance of the robot is very, very important. So now that we know what is the human-robot interaction, let's talk about the modalities and resources for social human-robot interaction. Here, I will just give a short description of these 5 topics, which are the roles of interaction, some caveats to roles. I will give you some awareness in human-robot interaction, and I will finish with some taxonomy and the comparison between human-robot interaction and human-computer interaction, because human-computer interaction is it's an old field, okay? It has a lot of years, and many people tries to translate all the theory from HCI into human-robot interaction, and you will see that it's a mistake. Okay, you have to avoid to translate all the theory. So the roles of intervention are the roles that people have when they are interacting with a robot. Okay, and people can have 5 different roles, and depending on the roles that people have, the interaction may be different. Okay, you can maybe with the same robot that you have many different roles, the interaction should be different between them. So the supervisor is the person who needs to understand when a robot is having a problem, the seriousness of the problem, and the effect of the mission. So it's the responsibility of the robot. Then we have the operator. The operator It's a person who needs to know the awareness of the robot health, the awareness of the environment, and awareness what the robot is doing to support the task and the mission. This is the person that in case that robot, for instance, has a failure error, the person is the person who takes the control of the robot. So imagine that you have a robot in a city navigating by itself, but then the robot gets lost. So that person can connect to the robot and teleoperate it. Okay? This is the operator. Then we have a teammate. Teammate is a person that works in the same, that has the same role as a robot. So the robot here is a member of the team. The teammates can give commands within the scope of the task mission. It means that the person can give commands to the robot, but also the robot can give commands to the teammate. And usually the interaction here as gestures or voice may be very helpful here. So here we are looking for a very natural communication between robots and humans. And finally, we have the mechanic programmer, who is a person who programmed the robot, and the bystander. Right? The bystanders are very, very important in robot interaction, because here no formal training using robots must coexist in environmental with robots. It means that if you are performing some experiments and you want to check which is acceptability of your system, you have to use bystanders, okay? Not colleagues of your laboratory, because then you will be committing a bias. You are doing tricks. So here we can consider as an example healthcare situations for cleaning robots, robot pets, or robot driving. So here we have to ask about how can a bystander form a mental model of what the robot's capabilities are. It means given appearance of the robot, the bystander will create a mental model of the robot's capabilities. So be careful because there's a relation between the appearance of the robot and the capabilities of it. Then should a bystander have a subset of interaction available? I recommend, yes. Okay, you want robots to be able to communicate with people. And what kind of interactions came into play? So some carrots to roles. One person might be able to assume a number of roles for a particular role. Okay, you can be the supervisor, the operator, the controller, everything, but you cannot be at the same time the bystander. Okay, bystander, it's only bystander. Every person involved in the construction or creation of that robotic systems cannot be a bystander. And assuming that we can determine information interactions needs for the different roles, we could use that information to design a user interface to support a given role. So it could be that that robot has different channels of communications depending on the role of the person that has to interact with it, and determine whether critical robots could be supported in one user interface. Maybe you have a team of robots working, and you are just using one interface. So, and some awareness. Awareness is used frequently in computer-supported cooperative work. And the first definition was created by Dury in 2001. And it says that if we have two participants, P1 and P2, who are collaborating via synchronous collaborative application, awareness is understanding that P1 has of the presence, identity, and activities of P2. But in human-robot interaction, this is different, because we have the single or multiple humans interacting with a single or multiple robots. So we don't have just two members. Okay, we can have more of them. And of course, non-symmetrical relationships between humans and robots, like difference of cognition. Until now, we have super smart robots, but they are not at the same level than humans. So we cannot assume that the cognition level of humans and robots are the same. So how can we define the HRI awareness? So we said that the given one human and one robot working on a task together, this awareness is understanding that the human has of the location, activities, status, and surroundings of the robot, and on the other hand, is the knowledge that the robot has of the human's commands necessary to direct its activity and the constraints under which it must operate. It means that usually when you have a robot developing a task, you created that robot or you developed that robotic system to work in a particular task. So you have to control the environment where the robot is working. So in general, instead of having one robot and one person, we can have n humans and n robots working together. So here we will say that there are 5 topics that we have to control. One is the human-robot awareness, which is understanding that the human have of the location, identities, activities, status, and surroundings of the robot. Then we have the human-human awareness, which is understanding that the humans have of the location, identities, and activities of the other humans collaborators. The robot-human awareness, it's more or less the same. It's information that the robot has about the other humans. The robot-robot awareness is the information that share the robots between them. And finally, the humans' overall mission awareness, which is the human's understanding of the overall goals of the joint human robot. So then we can classify human-robot interaction systems. Why it's important to classify? Because it's the way to measure properties of the system, and in that way, it's easier to compare systems. Nowadays, it's very, very difficult to compare our systems in terms of human-robot interaction with other institutes or other people developing the same systems, because as we have different robots and we have a different hardware, it's very difficult, almost impossible to compare. But we can, in more sense, make a classification, and if they are more or less on the same area, we can compare our works with the other ones. There are many types of classification. I will show you just 2 examples, but there are many, many. And of course, you can create your own classification if they are objective and, you know, created in a clever sense. So for instance, we can classify robots as robotics and robotic devices. Okay, we can have industrial robots and non-industrial robots. Inside non-industrial robots, we can have assistive robots and non-assistive robots. Inside assistive robotics, we can have non-social assistive robots and assistive social robots. The difference between the non-social assistive robot and assistive social robots is that they treat people as human beings. Okay, they consider the social conventions. And then we can have the service robots or the companion robots. Here's another example. Imagine that you have this situation, that you have an industrial robot that collaborates with human. So some definition that we have to, some topics that we have to define in our work are, which is the communication channel between the human and the robot and the human, because maybe it's not the same one. It could happen that it's not a bidirectional interaction. Then we can have to define the task of the robot in this case, so information exchange, manipulation, the reliability of the robot, the proximity, if they are working in the same area or not, if they are touching or not. Then we have the form of interaction between the human and robot, in this case collaboration, but it could be coexistence or collaboration. The type of the robot, the morphology of the robot, the temporal proximity, like if it's synchronous or not, the degree of autonomy of the robot, and the team composition. Okay, and with that we can just make a classification, and we can compare our works with another ones. And finally, a comparison between the human-robot interaction theory and the human-computer interaction. So much research to the date have been devoted to robot technology, but little on human-robot interaction. Human-computer interaction has been studied for many years, but tools and metrics do not really transfer to human-robot interaction. Why? Because the environment or the situation that we work with robots, it's not the same. Okay? Because robots need to be tested in different environments. We can have sensor failures repetitively, so no 2 robots will follow, for instance, the same path. Okay, this is different from HCI. That's why we cannot transfer all the information and all the theories that we have into human-robot interaction. And now, after this introduction, we will start talking about how can we evaluate our systems, our robotic systems, from the point of view of human-robot interaction. And as I said many times today, we are focused on how people are perceiving our systems, how people are feeling, how people are behaving. And we want to analyze all that topics. So human-robot interaction is a new field. It has more or less 25 years compared to other fields of robotics. Most studies cannot yet be reproduced because we have, as I said, two different hardwares. So it's something related to psychologists, because human-robot interaction field is a multidisciplinary field where you can find psychologists, engineers, mathematics, neuroscientists. So there are many people working on that. And in order to evaluate your systems, you should apply quantitative statistical model requiring a large-scale experiment and involving large sample size of participants. Or you can pursue a qualitative approach, focusing on case studies and in-depth analysis. Okay, you can choose between one of that two, and both of them are valid. So what happens? That metrics are not comparable due to bias toward application of specific measures. So what can we evaluate in human-robot interaction? We can evaluate the behavior of the robot, the behavior of people interacting with the robot, the ways of interaction, the social and psychology aspects, the technical characteristics and objective measures like success rate, interaction time, error rates. You can evaluate wherever you want, but you have to do it in a correct manner. So some metrics. There are many papers that talk about how can we measure or how can extract conclusions about our experimentation. One of the first one was the paper of Olsen and Gottschalk that presented a paper where they presented the metrics for evaluating human-robot interaction, and they split it in different topics. The first one was the task effectiveness. It's how well a human-robot team accomplishes performing some task. Then we have the neglect tolerance, which is autonomy of a robot with respect to some task. The robot attention demand, how much a robot is demanding. And the fan out is the number of robots simultaneously operating. Then we have another paper of Weiss et al. That it's called the User's Evaluation Framework for Human-Robot Interaction. And he also splits it in different ways. What the authors of the paper say is that the new technologies have considerable impact on various factors of the interaction between humans and robots. And they describe the usability, the social acceptance, the user experience, and the social impact of our robotic systems. I just want to make a description of the first two, which from my point of view, is the most important thing of that paper. So which indicators of usability do we have? We have the effectiveness of the system, which are the success rate or task completion rate. This is an objective measure. Then we have the efficiency, which is the rate of speed at which a robot can accurately and successfully assist humans. Then we have the learnability, the familiarity, consistency, predictability, or simplicity. The flexibility, this is very important. So the idea here is that we have a robot developing a task with a human. If the conditions change a little bit, what will do the robot? It will be able to perform the task or not. Or if we change a lot the initial condition, what will happen? So this is the flexibility. Then the robustness, the error preventing, the response is stable, and the utility. And regarding the social acceptance, here we have the performance expectancy, which is how people think that the robot would ask and what happens at the end. So we make this kind of comparisons. The effort expectancy and the attitude towards using technology, because we saw that different people there are people who are not interested in working with robots. So we have to analyze why is happening that and how can we solve that problem. So as a summary, the metrics in human-robot interaction and evaluation should be user-centered. We have to combine qualitative and quantitative measures. The typical scenarios are very important for the community, like having robots in the streets, having robots in hospitals, at homes. We can have companion robots as well. And it's a multidisciplinary in the evaluation, but also in the development. That's what I said. We can have psychologists working on that. We can have mathematicians, engineers, all of them. So now let's focus on how do we evaluate our methods and which methodologies will we will follow. Okay, this what you will have now is like a guidelines that if you have to perform experiments that involve humans, you can follow it. I will give you a lot of information that I think that is very useful for you. So the first of all, we have to define the study design and the validity and validity of questionnaires. Usually, when the study is human-centered, we use questionnaires. Okay, so here I will show you how to create these questionnaires and how to evaluate them. But it's very important to validate your questionnaires. Okay? And on the second part of that talk, I will explain to you how you have to validate and demonstrate the reliability of your questionnaires. So let's start with the study design. The first part is to define the research question. Okay? It's what do I want to demonstrate with my study? What do you want to learn, or what do you want to explain? So we have to define a testable question, okay, that it's based on the problem statement. Be careful. Be careful with the wording. It's crucial, the wording here, because it can different questions, it can relationship questions, it can determine the method and analysis. Okay, so, and the variables. Once we know what we want to demonstrate, we have to choose that variable that we will choose. Okay, the variable is a factor, a trait, or condition that can exist in different amounts of type in your research study. So the idea is, what do I want to analyze and which tools I will use to analyze them? So the research hypothesis is a statement which speculates the outcome of research experiments. So what do you expect is the answer to the research question. So imagine that we have that robot interacting with children. So we can say my research question could be, paper robot or children are interested in paper robot. Okay, this is my question. And then we have the research hypothesis. So knowing the question that I want to answer, I have to create some hypothesis. And with all my experimentation, I will demonstrate my hypothesis. So for instance, imagine that there's a typical work that talk about a small robot, and the researchers gave a hammer to the participants, and the idea here was to demonstrate that a more intelligent robot will be hit an equal number of times than a less intelligent robot. Okay, this was the null hypothesis. So the alternative hypothesis, a more intelligent robot will be hit a different number of times than a less intelligent robot. Okay, this is the hypothesis. To demonstrate that hypothesis, we have to compute the p-value. And here, which is the level of statistical significance, and is often expressed by a p-value between 0 and 1. The smaller the p-value is, the stronger the evidence that you should reject the null hypothesis. So if the p-value is very, very small, we can reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative one. In human-robot interaction, we usually pick a value lower than 5%. Okay? So with a p-value of lower than 5%, it indicates a strong evidence against the null hypothesis. Okay? And therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis. Now that we know what the hypotheses are, let's define the different kind of variables that we can play with. There are independent variables and dependent variables. The independent variables are the study factors and conditions, are the variables manipulated for the study and are not affected by other variables. So are the variables that we control, okay, that we can play with. And on the other hand, we have the dependent variables, which are the study outcomes and measurements, are the facts being studied and are influenced by other variables, are the variables that we do not control, are the responses from our studies. So let's see an example. Imagine that we have these companion robots that help elderly people. So my independent variables are the use or not the use of a pet robot as a companion robot for elderly people. So my independent variables are this. This is one. So we have two groups, group A and group B. And my dependent variable is the participant response. Okay? So the research question determines the study variables. For your future works on human-robot interaction, you have to take into account that what are some possible dependent variables you want to investigate, and what are some independent variables that might be important. Okay, as more variables you use, more people you will be required. So be careful, okay? Because the number of groups will increase, and the number of people that will be required for your experimentation will increase a lot. So that now that we know what is the research question, let's talk about the method, okay? So be ready to select and design studies methods for your human-robot interaction projects. Which are the elements that we can study? We can analyze the procedure of the experimentation, participants, which is how people are behaving, how people are feeling, and the measurements. So how, who, and what. Let's start with the procedure. Here you have to define, before you start your experimentation, you have to define your procedure. It means, how will be the study conducted? What are the steps of the study? What instructions do the researcher give to the participants? What does the robot do and when? How does the robot react to humans? How are the conditions varied? Where and when is the study conducted? So you have to control as many stuff as you can. Okay, it's very important to do that before you start with your human-robot interaction projects. You take into account all these considerations. So regarding the participants, here is who will participate in the study. And this is an important issue. Why? Because if you're developing robots that will work with children, you have to analyze the behavior of children. You cannot say, okay, I created that robot that will help children with autism, but I will check if everything is working, and I will demonstrate my hypothesis using adults. Okay, this is a mistake. You have to be careful with that. Okay, so you have to choose a sample of people that represent the population that the robot is focused on, that the robot has to work with, and recognize the limitation of your sample. Okay, of course you cannot analyze everything with everybody, but you have to know which are your limitations, and be aware of the response behavior and the sample bias. Okay, participants selected should be representative population. Okay, if not your hypothesis or what you demonstrate or what you demonstrated will be wrong. Then there's an important issue that I should comment to you, that as robots are more and more in our life, if you want to develop experiments with real robot with people, before the development of those experiments, you have to ask permission to an ethics committee of your institution. Okay, if you don't have that permission, you won't be able to perform those experiments. Okay, so be careful with that. And of course, you have to ask for a participant's consent. Okay, and here you have to give all the information about the project, about the experimentation. You also have to explain the benefits, the risk, the dissemination of the results. Probably you will record some data of that participant, so you have to ask permission to record that data, to gather that data, and if people want to delete it or to destroy the data, you have to do it. Okay. And on the other side, on the other part, you have to give instructions to the participants when they are developing the experiments. So here you have to explain what will the person do with the robot, how will the robot behave with the person, but you have to give the minimum information. What I always recommend to my students is that they write all the instructions in a paper sheet and give it to the participants. Why? Because you have to give always the same information to the participants. If you give more information to one participant, you are conditioning the behavior of that person. So that's important that you write everything in a paper sheet and you pass it to the participants. And finally, the measurements. What do we measure? Okay, so here, what type of data can we collect and how can we collect? Okay, as you know, we have qualitative data and quantitative data. Okay, we can measure qualities and non-numerical information, or quantities and numerical ratio-median information. So in most human-robot interaction studies, we include both types of measurements. And an accurate measurement is accurate and repeatable. So let's see how do we analyze the qualitative and how we obtain this kind of data. Usually, this kind of data is collected through observation, interviews, and open-end survey questions. Okay, and the results provided are quotes, case study, and we can code the surveys into quantitative data. It's important for demonstrating the statistical significance. Results have to be generalizable beyond the participants and more than just coincidence or chance. So let's see the type of question that we can ask. You can use an open-end questions. Here, the respondent can answer in a free form with little to no restriction, like, tell me about, what do you think about the robot, how did you feel, okay? But here may produce unexpected results, which can make the research more original and valuable, but it's difficult to analyze this kind of results. Then we have a subtype of these open-end questions, which are the leading questions. Here, questions are prepared to derive respondent opinion with a limited set of words. What do you think of the horrible effects of pollution? So we are saying that the effects are horrible. And then on the other side, we have the closed-end questions. Here, the respondent needs to choose between some options. Here, it's easy to analyze the data because we can code this data into quantitative data, okay? So if we see some difference between these two types of questions, we can say, did you experience good robot interaction? Yes or no? Or how did you feel about your robot interaction? So there are different. With the second one, with the open-end questions, we can extract more information, but it's very difficult to code into quantitative data to analyze them. And then we have, would you consider using our robot again? Yes or not? What would make you use our robot again? Okay, that is different. Some advantages of using questionnaires: they are inexpensive, they are practical, faster, we have a scalability, a comparability, can be used to compare and contrast other researches, it's easy to analyze and visualization, and the respondent needs anonymity, okay? But be careful to have a really long questionnaires, limit them to just 10 questions, more or less. And disadvantages. They can be, you can have dishonest answers, okay? Respondents may not be 100% truthful with their answers. You can have unanswered questions, the difference in understanding and interpretation. If the question is not clear, it may happen. Then harder to convey feelings and emotion. Some of the questions are difficult to analyze, and consensus responses or questionnaires are service fatigue. It happens a lot. So limit the time of your questionnaires more or less to 5 minutes. If not, people will stop reading and will answer randomly. So advices, what I said. Figure out what information do you want to extract. Keep your questions simple, clear, direct, and consistently wording. Use words with clear meanings. Use only 1 or 2 answer method, like a scar, fill in blanks. Not longer than 5 minutes, and avoid offering too few or too many options. Okay. So it's important to document how clearly results are coded into quantitative data, okay? Because you will use the data with this statistical test that I will show you now. So it's important to document that. So regarding the quantitative data, this is important to demonstrating statistical significance, which is results are generalizable beyond the participants, and the results are more than just coincidence or chance. So it can be collected through surveys, like semantic difference Likert scale, or structured interviews. And the results provided are numbers, which make us very, very easy to work with that. For instance, here you see 2 kinds of questions. You have the semantic differential that you choose between different degrees, or you just put here as the color blue makes me feel sad or happy, and you choose between that level that you prefer. Both of them are correct. So what can go wrong? It can go wrong the social desirability bias, which is people try to act in ways that are socially desirable. It happens a lot in robotics. It happens a lot. And the confirmation bias. Researchers with an hypothesis evidence supporting the hypothesis more clearly. It happens a lot as well, because you want to demonstrate your hypothesis, but it's like doing tricks, so be careful with that. What else can go wrong when measuring? If you use double-varied questions, it's important to you that the robot is safe and relevant. You have to split it into questions. It's important to you that the robot is safe, and the other one, it's important to you that the robot is relevant. The other one, the loaded questions. In what ways did you find the robot helpful? So you are saying that the robot is helpful, and maybe it's not. Then the leading questions. Do you agree that the robot appearance is more important than behavior? So here is saying that that it's more important the appearance than the behavior. And my advice, you can start doing your own questionnaires, of course, and after that I will explain to you how to validate them. But you can use an existing questionnaire and a question that are validated, and you can use it, and you can use them directly. You can use the Godspeed survey, and you can download it from this link. Here I printed it. Sorry. So you can use just some part of it, like you're talking about the anthropomorphism, another one, the animacy. There are many parts, but it's a validated questionnaire that you can use, and you can extract information from them. So I really recommend for the first try you use it. So the results, let's see how do we analyze the results. It depends on the type of the quantitative data. So from now on, I will be talking about quantitative data, okay? And depending on the kind of data, we will use one statistical test and another one. We have the categorical nominal, like gender, education level. We have ordinal, like scale questions, agree to disagree. The numerical that can be interval or rate. I won't go deeper because I really know that you know all this. So just to take into account that what kind of data are you using in your experimentation. So depending on the data you have, we will use different statistical methods. Okay. For univariate, that we have just one variable, we play with the central tendency, the mode, the median, the mean, the variant. Okay. How far does the range spread? Okay. We can use the range, interquantile, the standard deviation, blah blah blah. So let's see now some examples. So for instance, imagine that we have this robot in a maze, and my hypothesis is a more intelligent robot will find the faster way out of the maze. Okay? The null hypothesis is the one that I want to reject, is a more intelligent robot will find the same way out of the maze than a less intelligent robot. And which is the p-value, the significance, is a percent change given our sample observation and test that the null hypothesis is true. So when you are on interaction, statistical test is usually considered significant if p-value is lower than 5%. So ask yourself, do you have a different relationship questions? How many independent variables are you testing? What type of data is an independent variable? How many dependent variables are you testing? What type of data is a dependent variable? Is my data normally distributed? And with all of that, if you answer that questions, you will know which statistical test you may use. Okay, so let's see some examples. If your dependent variable is categorical, you likely use the chi-square test. Okay, here we have independent variables with 2 or more groups. The dependent variable is categorical data, and the test whether the frequency of observed values is what would be expected. So I prepare you some code here. Can you confirm me that you are seeing my Python notebook?
Yes, Anaís.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's see how you can use this kind of test with Python, R, or with an Excel. Okay, I recommend to use Python because it's very comfortable and exists a lot of libraries. So you will see that it's very, very easy. So here I create a data frame so I want to validate the relationship of gender and being a smoker or not. Okay, I want to know if exists a relationship between these two variables. So for that, we have to create the contingency data table. Okay, so here with this instruction cross-tab, and I define my two features, which are gender and smoker, and the Python module create this table. Okay. We also, of course, can play with percentages. Okay, it's the same, but writing here at the end of the instruction index. Okay, we can play with that. Okay, you can have a lot of different ways to create this contingency table. For instance, if you want normalize, you can normalize, put in here at the end, normalize all. Okay, whatever you want. Something that you can do as well is to use a heat map. With heat maps, you can visualize your data easily, and it's just create a heat map and put in the contingency table. Okay, so here you can see there are more men men that are smokers than the other ones, okay? But let's demonstrate statistically our scenario. So you will see that it's just an instruction. You have to use this instruction, G2 contingency, and then you put the metrics. And with this function, you will obtain the p-value, the freedom, whatever you want. Okay, so let's run this. And you may see that the p-value is high. It's 37%. Okay, as the p-value is high, means that we cannot reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so the null hypothesis was that the smokers and gender are independent. Okay, so we cannot reject this hypothesis, and we demonstrate, and we cannot demonstrate our hypothesis. Okay, so as you see, it's very easy using this using Python and using those libraries. Okay, for that one, we have to import from the scpy.stat the G2 contingency library. Okay, you see, it's very easy. I don't know if you want me to share those Python notebooks when the summer school finished, because I think it can be helpful for you. So let's continue with the presentation. Okay, and a special case of chi-square test is the McNemar's test. Here we have just two match groups, pre-post, and dependent variable are two possible value, true, false. Okay, this is done sometimes in robotics because you want to perform the same experiments with two different conditions with the same people. Imagine that you have a robot that is capable of accompanying people in a social way, and you check your system autonomously, so the robot is acting autonomously. And on the second part of the experiments, an expert is teleoperating the robot. Of course, the participants don't know that the robot is being teleoperated, and you want to know if there is difference or not. So you can say that if you obtain that there's no difference between these two behaviors, you can say that your robot is as good as a person being teleoperated by that robot. Then imagine that now, instead of having a category of data, you have the dependent variable is an internal var or a ratio. Okay. In that cases, you have to use the t-test. Here we have two independent variables, and the dependent variables are normally distributed. It's very important. This is an assumption. The data has to be normally distributed. If it's not, you cannot use this t-test. This is for two groups, but if you have more groups, okay, if your independent variable has more than two groups, then you can use the ANOVA. And here again, the dependent variable has to be normally distributed, okay? So let me show you an example again on Python of how do we use the ANOVA test. Okay, so there are three types of ANOVA test. There's the one way. Here you just have one factor, which is one independent variable. The two-way ANOVA is you have two different factors, so two features that you want to analyze. And if you have repeated measurements for treatments, for instance, or time on same subject, you can use the repeated measure ANOVA. Okay? So depending on the condition that you are working on, you will use one kind of ANOVA test or another one. So here you have to use the import pandas. Here I download an existing data frame. Okay, here are 4 different treatments on people. So we have just one independent variable, which is the treatment A, B, C, and D, but we have 4 different groups. That's why we have to use ANOVA. Okay, treatments are independent variables, as I said. And for this experimental design, there is only one factor, one treatment. That's what we are using one way ANOVA. So let's organize by column our data frame. So here we see index is like number of person being the treatment and the value that we have. Let's plot the box plot. I recommend to use box plot on all these cases because it gives you a lot of information. And it can be seen that visually, it seems that the different treatments has different responses. So it makes me think that probably we will see a statistical difference between the different treatments. Okay, so again, from scpy.stats, we have to import the stats. Okay, we import it, and we run the F1 way ANOVA. Okay, the instruction is very easy. You just follow this, use this function f one way, and put here the different groups that you want to use. You can put the fourth, or you can put 3, whatever you prefer. And I will print the f value and the p value. So as you see, the p value is very, very small. Okay? What is telling us that there's a statistical difference between the different treatments. Okay? So here I put just the table. Here you have the f and the p value. Okay? So we can say that there's a significant difference among the different treatments. Okay? We demonstrated it statistically. Let's say a second example, which is two-way ANOVA method. Here we have 2 independent variables. We have the genotype, okay, and the genotype and the yield in years. Okay. So let's see, and we want to see the effect of this interaction of yields. Okay, so we have the genotype, the yield, and the value. So here we have 2 factors, 2 independent variables, which are genotype and years, and a value. Okay, I will show you first the box plot. Here you see genotype, the values, and all the different components and the different groups that we have. Okay, and for that, first of all, what we have to do is create our model, okay, with that function OLS. And here we have 3 different comparisons. Okay, we are picking the genotype, years, and the combination of both at the same time, genotype and years. Okay, so here we saw the table, and what we saw here are the p-value. Okay, so you see that for all the years, for all the factors, the p-value is lower than 5%. So we can say that there are statistical difference for the genotype, the year, and the interaction between the both factors. So we can conclude that the type of genotypes are significant affects the yield outcome, the time again affects the yield outcome, and the interaction of both again affects the yield outcome. Okay. So as the interaction is significant, let's visualize the interaction plot. Okay, this is called profile plot of interaction effect. Okay, here we see how changes the genotype and the mean of regarding the mean of value. Okay, and here can we see that the behaviors are very, very different. Okay, I think with that examples, everything is more clear. Okay, so, but as I said, there's something mandatory that you have to demonstrate that you collected data is normally distributed. And how do we? But what happens if it's not normally distributed? That you have to use the Mann-Wilkinson test. Okay, so you have to check if the data is normally distributed, and if it's not, you have to use this test. But how do we know that our data is normally distributed? Using another test, which we can use whether the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test or the Shapiro-Wilk statistic. Okay, I will show you an example of the first one. Okay. So the idea, the good thing of that test is that it's just to test whether or not a sample comes from a certain distribution. So not only normally distributed. You can compare between 2 different data frames if they follow the same distribution, or you can look for which distribution they follow. Let's see them in 2 examples. So here I'm creating a data frame that follows a Poisson distribution. Okay, so I know that it's not a normal distribution. So it's so easy. You have to import the KS test and just put in KS test your data and the distribution that you want to compare with. So here, what we obtain is a p-value of almost 0. Okay. So as the p-value is almost 0, we reject the null hypothesis, and we have the sufficient evidence that the samples does not come from a normal distribution, which is true because, as you said, I create that data from a Poisson distribution. Okay. But if I want to compare two different data sets, imagine that I have data one that is a normal distribution and the data two that are log normal distribution. So of course they are not following the same distribution. So here I have to import the KS2sum distribution, and it's so easy. You have to use this function KS2sum and put the two data frames that you want to compare. Here you see that we obtain a value of very, very small. So as the p-value is less than 0.5, and we reject the null hypothesis, so we have evidence to say that the two samples do not come from the same distribution. So we really know it. Okay, let's check if the first one, the data one, it's a normally distributed. You see that the p-value is very high, 88%. So of course here we know that our data it's normally distribution, and then you can use, for instance, the ANOVA test. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay. So just some notes. As more groups of independent variables you have, less significance you will obtain. Okay, you can avoid that problem having more and more participants. But I know that it's a hard work. Then the statistical power of your test depends on the p-value of the set. Of course, if your p-value is bigger than 5%, it's going to be easier to demonstrate your hypothesis. The number of the participants and the effect size, so how different the groups are. So now that you know how to create your questionnaires and how to evaluate them and obtain and being able to demonstrate your hypothesis, let's see how can you validate your questionnaires. Okay, so here there are the two topics, which are the validity and the reliability of your test. So as you may know now, the questionnaire is an important method of data collection and it's used extensively. The advantages, some of them are that they're less expensive and offers greater anonymity. But on the other hand, you have some disadvantages, which are the application is limited, the response rate is low, and the opportunities to classify issues is lacking because you will perform the experiment, you will give the questionnaires to the participants, and when you finish everything, then you start to analyze the questionnaires. And as you have anonymity, you don't know who answered the question, so you cannot solve these doubts. So which are the ideal requisites for your questionnaires? They have to be clear and easy to understand. The layout is easy to read and present to A. This is important. Maybe you think that it's not, but if your questionnaires are not pleasant to A, people won't read and they will answer your questionnaires randomly. Then we have the sequence of questions easy to follow, should be developed in an interactive style, and sensitive questions must be worded exactly. So what is validity? Validity is the ability of an instrument to measure what it's intended to measure. So you have to demonstrate that you are measuring what you want to measure. Is the degree to which the researcher has measured what he has said to measure. Okay? That definition was given by Smith in 1991. And the idea is that, are we measuring what we think we are measuring? So I will explain you two different methods that you can use to validate your questionnaire. You will see that they are very easy, but you require a bunch of experts that analyze your questionnaires. So the first one is the average congruency percentage, ACP, created by Putnam in 1978. All that theory is coming from psychologists. That's why we can use it here. So here, the experts compute the percentage of questions deemed to be relevant for them and take the average of all experts. If you have a value higher than 90%, we can say that the questionnaire is valid. Okay, for instance, you have two experts. And experts give you a score of 100 and the second one a score of 800. So the ACP is 90%. It's not strict larger than 90%, so it's not valid. Then we have the second method created by Martusa in 1977. This is called the context validity index, and here we have two kinds of that. The first one is the context validity index for individual items. It means it evaluates each question of your questionnaire, and the content validity index for the scales. So let's see how does it work. The first one, the idea is that to have a panel of content experts, and you ask them to review the relevance for each question on a 4-point Likert scale. Okay, so you have to pick minimum 3 experts, maximum 10 experts. So they put a score on each question. 1 means not relevant, 2 is somewhat relevant, 3 relevant, and 4 very relevant. Then you collapse for each question. The number of experts are given 3 or 4 counted as relevant, and those questions counted with 1 or 2 are not relevant. And the proportion is calculated. So for instance, if we have in a particular question that 4 or 5 experts give you a score of 3 or 4, then the ICVI is going to be 80%. That it's going to be valid. Some critics on that method. The main problem here is that it collapses experts' multi-point assessment into 2 categories, relevant and not relevant. Does not give you inference of comprehensiveness of whole questionnaire, because they're giving you just each question separately. So you are not playing with the relationship between questions. Then the problem of change agreement. To overall that, Lynn proposed the following one. Okay, if you have 5 or fewer experts, all must agree. Okay, if one of the experts don't agree, it means that this question should be deleted. And if you have 6 or more, should not be less than 0.78. Let's see an example. That then we have the SCVA. That here the proportion of items of an instrument that achieve rating 3 or 4 by all the content experts. You will see now in an example, which is going to be easier. Then we have the universal agreement or the average. So imagine that we have a questionnaire with 10 items, and we have 6 experts. Okay, and each one says if it's a good question or not. Okay, so for instance, for the 6 first questions, we have the number of agreement is 6. And for the other ones, all of them agree. So the item CVI is going to be 0.83, and the other one is 1. So the mean of ICVI is 90%. The universal is 40% because you only have 4 questions where everybody agrees. And the mean expert proportion is 90%. So this is a way that where you can evaluate your questionnaires. Okay, I'm giving you just as a resume how do we split and the taxonomy of all the methods. So I recommend to use all of them and then pick the one that is better for you. It's a good way to do that. But which to follow? So report both value YCV and SCVI, right? And using just CVI. Usually the best method, of course, is the universal one, because it's stringent validity, but it will be difficult to use it if multiple experts are validating. As more experts you have, more difficulty to have a universal agreement. Okay, in that situation you can use the average one. Okay, so this is the validity. So let's study now, which is what is the reliability. The reliability is the ability of an instrument to create reproducible results. Okay, so the idea is that each time it's used, similar scores should be obtained. Okay? Because if not, means that you are doing tricks, maybe you have a change, the results won't be consistent. That's why it's important to demonstrate the reliability of your results. So a questionnaire is said to be reliable if we get similar answers repeatedly. So it cannot be calculated exactly, it can be measured by estimating correlation coefficients. So regarding reliability, we have 3 different topics. We have the stability, the internal consistency, and the equivalence. What is stability? Stability is done to ensure that same results are obtained when used consistently for 2 or more items. Okay, so you are stable on time. So how does it work? You have to give your test twice to the same participant, okay, at different times, of course. So we are repeating the same experiment. It's been repeated twice. Then this is used for things that are stable over time. Of course, it's not mandatory to do at every time. Okay? It's some recommendation. But if you want to demonstrate that the functionality of the robot is the same over time, you have to demonstrate the stability of your system. So it's easy and a straightforward approach, but which are the disadvantages? Practice effect. What could happen? That the person interacting with the robot learns how to use the robot, and of course the behavior won't be the same one, and probably the results also won't be the same one. Too short interval in between. We have the effects of memory, okay? So, but of course the impression of the robotic systems won't be the same if people are doing the same in a short time of time, okay? Because they are becoming experts in some way. And some traits may change with time. What could happen in robotics? We can have. I'm talking all times in an ideal way, but or ideal world, because a lot of time happens in robotics is that your sensor failure, and if the sensor failures, the behavior of the robot changes, and the behavior of people changes, and the presence of the people changes, and then the questionnaires will have bad marks. Okay, it could happen. It's normal. Okay, it's normal, and probably when it happens, you have to discard these questionnaires because the conditions what we are working on are different. Okay, and for that kind of to demonstrate this stability, usually we use the correlation coefficient formula, this person, and then you can say that if values are from 0.7 to 1 or minus 1 to minus 0.7, what should be strong. It's going to be moderate if it's in between 0.3 and 0.69, and of course not too weak. It is between 0.1 and 0.29. Okay. Then we have the internal consistency. This is very important. Why it's important? Because maybe your questionnaires have different blocks measuring different skills of your robot. Imagine that you have a block of measuring the intelligence, another one to measure the sociability of the robot, and every block has different questions. Okay, so you have to demonstrate that it exists an internal consistency inside any block. Okay, how do we do that? Using the Cronbach alpha. Okay, with this Cronbach alpha, it has a value that give you, which is the consistency on each block. Okay, normally it's required to have an alpha bigger than 0.7. Okay, if you have an alpha bigger than 1, it means that inside the block it's consistency, and of course all the questions are valid. If you have a value less than 0.7, means that you have to delete one of the questions. Which one? Delete one and compute the alpha, the Cronbach alpha, and then you have to delete every time one question, and pick the bunch of questions that has the biggest Cronbach alpha. There's no library nowadays on Python that computes the Cronbach alpha, but I create this function that computes it properly. Okay, so I put it here because if you have my slides, you can copy this function and compute the alpha with your results. Okay, so for instance, this is a paper that I did where I have 6 different blocks. The first one was the perception of ease of use, the perception of usefulness, the interaction with virtual reality goggles when watching a 3D video. So researches of that gave me the results, and what I did is having the number of items. So for each block has a different number of questions. So the first one has 5 questions, the second one 5, the third one 4 questions. Okay, and I compute the Cronbach alpha. Okay, and all of them had an alpha bigger than 0.7. So we do not have to delete any item of the questionnaire. Okay? As I said, if one of the blocks has a lower value, it means that we have to delete one of the questions because it means that there's no consistency between our results, okay? And at the end, we also compute the overall value, and it was very, very high. So it was a really good questionnaire, and the results obtained were really good. So finally, the equivalence, okay? It's used when two observers study a single phenomenon simultaneously. And here we have to use the inter-rater relativity, which is the number of agreements divided by the number of agreements plus the number of disagreements. So imagine that you have two raters, which are Mark and Susan. Those are the variables that we are measuring. And here we see we have a 0 if they agree, and a 1 or a -1 if they disagree. And finally, we have an agreement of 80%. Okay, we don't use this. We don't have to demonstrate that in robotic from now on. Who knows? But you should know that it exists. So as a resume, I'm just finishing. We have to measure 3 different stuff. We have to measure the stability over time, the equivalence of items, and the agreement between raters. For each one, a different test has to be used. And here I explain how to accomplish that. Okay, for the first time, we have to give the same test to the same people in 2 different times. Here we measure the correlation or the relation between the same question, the question of the same block. And finally, with the inter-rater, we have multiple researchers measure some instrument and determine percentage of agreement between them. So this is it for me, okay? Validating a questionnaire, you reduce the bias and the ambiguity. And then you have a better quality of your data and credible information, because it's important that you validate your hypothesis in a correct way. So in a nutshell, a questionnaire can be relevant but invalid, but a valid questionnaire, it's always relevant. Okay? So from now, I just finished. I hope that you enjoyed that presentation, and I hope that you learn how to measure and how to evaluate your systems when a person is involved. And of course, I will be glad if you have some questions. I put here my mail, because if you have a particular doubt in the future, you need some advice about how to develop your experimentation involving people, you can ask me whenever you want. So time for questions. I'll be glad to answer them. Simon said yes, it means, okay, sorry, another thing. So I think there's no question. I hope that everything was clear. Is it possible to evaluate questions by observations of the reactions? You mean just by observation? Of course, you can extract conclusions from video stream or gazing. Yes, of course. You can extract conclusions also looking at the experiments and seeing what happens. Okay, but to demonstrate your hypothesis, you need the data. You need numerical data. Okay, from video, you can record the video and after that analyze that video and obtain the data that you required. For instance, I don't know, imagine a robot and a person collaborating in some task, and you want to measure which was the position and the behavior. And kind of data could be answered. Okay. First of all, for all that method, you have to obtain you require a qualitative data. Okay. Sorry. How can you evaluate its validity? Okay, I think you are doing a lot of questions. Okay, I will try to answer all of them. The first of all, you can of course record all the experimentation and after that analyze the results. But I'm talking here about the use of surveys. Why? Because we want to know the impact on people. Okay, and it's very difficult to know the personal impact of a person if we don't ask them directly. Okay, that's why it's important to use at least some kind of questionnaires. And any kind of data could be an answer. What do you mean?
May I give in voice the question? Is it good for you if I speak?
In voice, but
yes, please the question. So you have an instrumentation for validating questionnaires in statistical method, and I would like to remove the questionnaires. So the questionnaires are only hypothetically exist, and I have a kind of rule-based system, but I have the questionnaires, I have the answers, and I observe people's reaction. How long gazing in a point on a screen, for example, what you are doing, how close you are standing, if you are discussing or whatever. So you could have any kind of observation. And is it a good idea to map these observations to answers to a questionnaires and make the evaluation similar way as we have done with the real questionnaires? So is it possible to transfer the methodology to a questionnaire-less system, where the questions and answers only exist? Thank you. This is a question. Sorry.
So if I understood properly, you mean that instead of using questionnaires, use directly the data that you observe from the experimentation? Yes.
And try to use these observations as answers to specific questions, which was done before, independent. It's a kind of experiment to speed up the filling the questionnaires. I need many answers, and instead of the questions, just observing and filling the questionnaires automatically.
Okay, this is a good idea. But the only thing that is, the idea is how you have to transform all the data that you record into data that you can analyze.
Yes,
you're capable
exactly.
of make this transformation.
But we need a tool of validation. We need a tool for validation. Was it a correct hypothesis? What was the null theorem or whatever? So we need the methodology to prove that this quasi-questionnaire is reliable or has some meaning or whatever. For example, if I map a gaze to yes and no answers, is it a correct way to do this test or it's fake? I have to validate some other methodology.
I understand. What you can do is compare a regular questionnaire with the one that you perform, and see if there's a statistical difference or not between them. Okay, compare the results that you obtain with the method that you explained to me and a regular questionnaire. And if you demonstrate that there is no statistical difference between them, it means that you can use both of them.
So I can validate it with a real questionnaire, you mean?
Yeah.
I can do the validation with it. Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice question. I don't know if there is any other question. Now I think Victor, Anna, that we are done.
Do we have more questions, please? Okay, it seems everything is clear.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that it's time to go to the toilet.
Thank you very much, Anaís.
It has been a long session. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you. And thank you very much, everyone, for assisting me. Thank you, Angelos.
Thank you.